MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin, the publisher of TheBreaker.News. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
Bob, you've been very busy in BC Supreme Court covering the bail hearing for the chief financial officer for Huawei telephones. Can you tell us about what has gone on?
Well, Meng Wanzhou is now living in the Dunbar house that previously served as their summer getaway for her and her husband, Liu Chaozhang, who's also known as Carlos. We found out in court that he has another name. She's got other names too. She's also known as Kathy Meng and also Sabrina. Now, the interesting part is that she is, it's not quite house arrest, but she's on a curfew, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. every night. She can only travel within Vancouver and Richmond and the North Shore and can't go to the airport, and she's turned over her passports. There's a $10 million bail deal. $7 million is from the value of the real estate that her husband is in her husband's name. Two properties. One's a mansion in Shaughnessy, which just so happens to be 2 doors down from the official residence of the U.S. Consul General. Of all places, that's where they bought a mansion. And the other is in Dunbar, almost halfway between the senior and junior campuses of the St. George's Boys School is where they live, and that's where they are, and that's where their in-laws, her in-laws, were previously staying, and that's where they'd stay when they come here on their summer vacations. She's normally based in Shenzhen, China, and that was the big issue with the bail hearing, was the lawyer for the Attorney General of Canada, federal crown lawyer representing the U.S., putting forward the application to the judge that there should be no bail, that she should be kept in jail, because she is a flight risk. She doesn't have roots here per se, even though she does have real estate with her husband. But she doesn't have roots here per se and has unlimited wealth, basically, because her father is the multi-billionaire owner of, or founder of Huawei, the very large Chinese corporation, which has about 180,000 employees in about 120 countries. And it's a strategically important telecommunications and technology company. It's not just selling cell phones to compete these days with Samsung and Apple, but they're also involved in complex telecommunications network systems, including the next generation mobile phone and wireless internet and data systems. 5G is what they're building out. And 5G is what the Americans don't want from Huawei, but Canada seems open to Huawei coming in here and building the 5G network. And there's concerns by various allies of Canada, including the U.S., including Australia, that Huawei is doing that 5G work on behalf of China so it can and control networks. If you're in the modern 21st century economy and you can control the medium, you can control the message for all sorts of political and economic gain. So that's a severe worry among the intelligence community that that is what Huawei is involved with. What this all goes back to is that in August there was an arrest warrant issued in New York for Meng Wanzhou's arrest, because there is evidence that the U.S. says it has, that between 2009 and 2013, that Huawei used a company called Skycom to conduct transactions with banks in order to enable Huawei to do business with Iran against the sanctions by the United States and by the European Union. The U.S. basically says that there was fraud committed, and that Meng herself misrepresented the role of Skycom and what Huawei was doing to banks in order to enable those transactions, and they called them victim banks. So we're waiting for the United States to deposit its fulsome case with the BC Supreme Court for the extradition hearing. It only needed to prove to Canada that there was an arrest warrant issued and that there was what it believed an offense that took place, so it needed to apprehend the suspect. And so that was satisfied, but for the extradition case to go forward, they have 2 months from the day of the arrest, so that means by February 1st, the United States has to file its formal application for extradition, which would have much more details than are already established. And we have to have some evidence in order to try here on for extradition, basically. But that could take months, if not years, as we've seen here in British Columbia. The most famous case was Rakesh Saxena, the Marxist millionaire is what they called him, a South Asian fella who was credited by some for causing the Asian flu, that Asian economic downturn that happened back in the end of the 90s, early 2000s. He was caught in Whistler in 1996, and he was here in our community under bail conditions until 2009. When all of his avenues finally were exhausted, he went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada to try to appeal a BC Court of Appeal judgment. And as the Supreme Court sometimes does, it decided not to hear the case. So the Thai police came and took Rakesh Saxena away. That was a long period of time. In this case, Meng Wanzhou is part of her bail conditions are that she's supposed to pay for around-the-clock security. Pay for a company to have a GPS monitor around her ankle so that they know where she is every minute of the day. And they have a little bit of alarm there to make sure that she's back at her home for curfew and that she doesn't go beyond the area around Richmond, Vancouver, and the North Shore. And she's got to pay for the security detail, which is consisting of a driver, a vehicle, and 2 officers and their technological equipment. So that'll be a very large bill, but then again, here's someone who is the heir to the fortune of China's biggest telecommunications company, one of the biggest telecommunications companies in the world, that has grown exponentially over the years. And while it was growing, we found out through the court hearings that while Huawei was growing, Meng Wanzhou was basically part of the community here. She actually got a permanent resident card back in 2001 and let that lapse in 2009, didn't take it to the next step, didn't become a citizen, but was a permanent resident under Canadian law. And, of course, her husband bought the house in Dunbar in 2009. And the one in Shaughnessy in 2016. And so that real estate together is worth almost $21 million. Of course, it's mortgaged as well through HSBC, which is, interestingly enough, one of the banks that they were doing business with that led to the problem with the United States authorities. And it was talked about in court that this actually goes back to an exclusive report that Reuters had in 2013 that exposed the role that Huawei was playing to import Hewlett-Packard computer equipment into China, contrary to the sanctions. So this isn't something that is entirely brand new per se, but it's something that the Americans thought had ventured into the criminal territory, so they're trying to prosecute it.
Now, we have the Prime Minister saying this is not political, and on the other hand, you have President Donald Trump saying, hey, if we can get a trade deal with China, we'll spring her.
Yeah, well, that's Donald Trump for you. Donald Trump looking for the art of the deal. He's trying to see what kind of artistic creation he can make out of this that would change the course of trade history and make things a little more palatable to the United States economy when it comes to China. He's always looking out for that. But then again, that also ventures into other territory where politicians aren't really supposed to be meddling in the courts. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And that's not in the U.S.'s favor either, especially when you've got the Chinese side of things meeting its chest, thumping its chest as it often does, and using its propaganda organs to say that this is all just a politically motivated court case. It certainly doesn't help the U.S. case when Donald Trump does whatever he can to actually validate the Chinese propaganda. But having said that, there's enough of a legal question that this will have to go to the extradition hearing, and this also allows Canada and Canadians to examine the trade history, the trade relationship, and the political relations with China. Again, China is a large trading partner. It's the homeland of many Canadians. It's also a country which has it's got the expanding middle class, but it's got a lot of poverty, and it's got a lot of problems, especially when it comes to human rights. Their 21st century digital surveillance, their mistreatment of people who are Muslim, the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, where there are concentration camps to try to re-educate, is what they say, to re-educate the Muslims, because there is growing discord between the Muslims who feel that they're mistreated in Xinjiang and they want their own independent country. There's, of course, the decades-old verbal conflict over Tibet. There are so many other aspects in China. There's no free press. There's no free religion. There's no real rule of law or respect of international accords when it comes to how prisoners should really be treated. And there's, of course, the surveillance state, the propaganda state in China. They've got their own system called social credit, where they're trying to marry everything to big data and to modify behavior of citizens. This is again a country with so many problems, country which a lot of other countries in the world and corporations in the world, because they've done business with China, have kind of turned a blind eye to the human rights aspect of it, or had thought naively perhaps that you do more trade with China, China opens up, and then China becomes more like us, more democratic like the West. Well, that hasn't happened, especially when you got Xi Jinping as president, who is now president for life, because the old term limit system as president of China was thrown out earlier this year when they essentially made him the most powerful leader of China since Chairman Mao.
Did you find it ironic that the lawyer was arguing about human rights protection for the freedom of the so-called accused?
Absolutely, although it was interesting to watch how the Chinese propaganda organs around the world were trying to spin this. Now, the lawyer for Meng Wanzhou, David J. Martin, he specializes in extradition cases like this, international white-collar crime. In his case, he did point out, and it was also based on an affidavit that Meng Wanzhou swore, that she does have some health problems. She has a history, she says, of high blood pressure and carcinoma and sleep apnea. He said, of course, that it's not as comfortable in jail because as much as the medical staff in jail do the best they can, it is jail and it's not a hospital and it's definitely not a country club. But there was nothing that David J. Martin actually introduced in court that indicated that she was being mistreated in jail or that the Canadian jail conditions at the Alouette Women's Correctional Center in Maple Ridge, nothing to suggest at all that she was receiving substandard treatment or treatment that wouldn't meet an international standard. Definitely treatment that would be better than one would get in a Chinese jail. What we heard in court was different from what we heard out of court, where the Chinese government was using its propaganda arms to try this also in the court of public opinion, to prop up China and to do what China often does, which is bully those who are other countries who might dare question China and its intentions.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp. is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, what's the latest on the scandal surrounding the BC legislature's Sergeant-at-Arms and the clerk of the legislature?
Well, we've had the BC Liberals, Mary Pollack, the House Leader, appeared at a couple of meetings. There was a meeting last week where Daryl Plekas was very blunt and said that he is putting his job and reputation on the line basically to protect him as well as Ellen Mullen, his special aide, that from basically the start of his tenure as Speaker, he noticed some improprieties and he wanted to get to the bottom of it, and it was his duty to do so because previous speakers had not done due diligence. He was doing due diligence, and he wants a forensic audit, and he's absolutely 100% confident that the results of that forensic audit will shock British Columbians, will anger British Columbians, and it will actually allow British Columbians a chance to have confidence in the role that he played, and will be happy with Ellen Mullen being involved in this, even as a junior role. The BC Liberals have tried to obfuscate things. Mary Pollack, the House Leader, appeared at a meeting last week after issuing a letter, and after Andrew Wilkinson put an op-ed in the Vancouver Sun. It's been interesting to listen to the full meeting of the Legislative Assembly Management Committee, and then this week the Finance and Audit Subcommittee, to hear the approach that the Liberals have tried to take. They basically want to do whatever they can to target the Speaker, who's also the chair of these committees, Daryl Plekas. They basically want revenge because he left their caucus after standing up to Christy Clark. Christy Clark left the leadership, and there's some in the Liberals who didn't want to see Christy Clark go, even though she was widely blamed within the party for losing the 2017 election, losing power to the NDP in 2017, but she had some loyalists, and there were others, though, that were on the same page as Daryl Plekas. Someday the whole truth will come out of what happened in Penticton when Plekas did stand up to her and challenged her authority to continue as leader. Well, he's getting challenged now by Liberals who really just want to exact revenge because they believe that if they topple the Speaker, they could shift power in the legislature or even force another election. I don't think the Liberals are at all anywhere near being election ready for one big reason is money. In fact, after today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting where the Liberals walked out of it eventually, frustrated with the lack of success in moving a few motions because they were voted down, well, they put out a fundraising email. So they're using this as an opportunity to remind their own supporters it's just a little more than 12 days before Christmas, to send them 5 golden rings or something else. They're using this as a fundraising opportunity at Christmas time. Of course, for tax purposes, a lot of political parties and other entities do make fundraising appeals before the end of the calendar year for tax reasons. But it does seem a little bit tacky that the Liberals would use this as a reason for fundraising when there are so many other worthy causes in British Columbia. There's people with not enough food, people with not adequate housing, people with no housing whatsoever that need help at this time of year. No, the Liberals are out there doing fundraising to ask for donations to their cause. after having a big debt after the last election. So that's what they're doing. And then actually, it was Sonia Firstnell, it was the Green. It wasn't anyone in the NDP who actually basically said to Mary Polak, the House Leader, that she knew what she was up to, that this was just a political ploy. That the Liberals don't really want to get to the bottom of this, even though they're asking some pointed questions to Fleckus. Questions that Fleckus and the others are reluctant to answer because of the fact there is an RCMP investigation with 2 special prosecutors. That's a simple fact right there that, the Liberals are trying to say that the legislature cannot function financially or cannot get approval to go forward financially while this scandal is happening. Meanwhile, Fleckus is sitting there saying that, it can function, but at the same time there has to be a proper forensic audit to see where money went, to see where money was wasted. Obviously, that's a smart idea in order to find out where they can go in the future, what kind of roadmap they can have in the future to make sure that there is no malfeasance if they are trying to prove malfeasance on the behalf of Craig James and Gary Lenz, the 2 who are suspended. One thing that is very interesting, of course, there is the RCMP investigation. There are the 2 special prosecutors. There are no charges. There are no charges right now. That's very important to remember. I did last week after the committee meeting where Darryl Fleckus basically pointed the fingers at the offices of Craig James and Gary Lenz that there was some sort of misspending there. I contacted the lawyers for Craig James and Gary Lenz. Haven't heard back from them at all. I'd love to hear what Mr. Lenz and Mr. James feel about what Darryl Fleckus said at that December 6th committee meeting, Legislative Assembly Management Committee meeting, because they were the previous week saying that everything they did was all right and that they were innocent, and Craig James even used the words bulletproof, that he'd brought in some bulletproof accounting systems. Well, it's been all quiet since Darryl Fleckus chaired that meeting last week and basically went on, for lack of a better word, a rant. And we haven't heard from James or Lenz, and I find it very interesting in this atmosphere.
Does Fleckus as Speaker have protection from being sued for libel or slander for things he says in connection with the legislature?
Well, that committee meeting should be just like it is in the legislature, that there would be privilege, that comments made inside those rooms would be similar to comments made inside a courtroom by lawyers or witnesses, that they're made in good faith, they're using parliamentary language, and that it really is about getting the truth out there and speaking frankly in an open forum. So I don't see why that committee meeting should cause any legal recourse. But on the other side of things, you would have thought that Craig James and Gary Lenz, at least through their lawyers, would have addressed what was said at that committee meeting last week. In many ways, though, the silence is deafening. I don't know what you can read into that whatsoever, especially when there's an RCMP investigation with 2 special prosecutors. But it was just the week before that these 2 sat in front of the media at a news conference with one of their lawyers, with their publicist. They hired a publicity company, crisis communications company, to help them get the word out. So they said what they said that week, before Darryl Fleckus said what he said. We haven't heard them say anything since then, and I'm all ears if they want to say anything.
When was the last time you heard of somebody hiring a PR firm if they're accused of something?
Well, that's an interesting one, especially when at the time that they hired the PR firm and the lawyer, they were not actually directly accused of anything. Right now, they are suspended with pay based on this investigation. There is some suggestion there, of course, that there was wrongdoing. We don't know what that is, but the RCMP acknowledged that there is the investigation, and they're the only 2 that have been suspended so far. Obviously, to them, it was a great shock, and to them, a great hit to their pride, as it would be for anyone. But this is the other dynamic dynamic of this is that this is an institution that Daryl Plekas said he's ultimately responsible for as being the speaker, as being the most senior person there. This is an institution which runs the day-to-day government, the government facilities over there in Victoria. This is a facility that is outside of the Freedom of Information law, that we are the ones that pay for it. British Columbians, 4.5 million British Columbians, saying it's 4.7 million now, do their share to pay for the operation of the legislature, where about a net $77 million is spent every year, and that money is basically spent secretly. You know, the legislature has in recent years proactively disclosed or voluntarily disclosed how much they do pay in salaries, how much they do pay for contracts every year. But you and I, others in the media, citizens, we can't, through Freedom of Information, ask for for receipts, for instance. We can't ask for that. We're not allowed to get that. I've tried it just for the heck of it, not through the FOI, but just contacting the clerk's office in the past. We can't get that because they're not legally required to give it to us. And I think that we'll see how this unfolds in the weeks, months, and perhaps even years to come. But you've got to hope that there's a legacy from this, that someone in government will be brave. If it's not the NDP, then a government after the NDP will be brave enough to change the law so that the legislature of British Columbia is covered under Freedom of Information. We've got a 19th century institution existing in the 21st century, and it's treated with this 19th century secrecy. We demand better. We deserve better.
Are other legislatures more open in other provinces or, say, Ottawa?
This is basically the way it is. Ottawa's had similar problems. They've got a similar committee to what BC has. In Ottawa, they don't call it the Legislative Assembly Management Committee. They call it the Board of Internal Economy. And again, this group, like BC and other legislatures, have been dragged kicking and screaming into meeting in public and having their transcripts published. Even this committee, this committee that exists in Victoria, Legislative Assembly Management Committee, they only webcast audio from the meetings. There's no video. There's no video from the meetings. They do allow TV cameras in sometimes. They did at the December 6th meeting, but their webcasts are audio only, in similar fashion to the Senate. So you've got these committees and these institutions that are afraid to actually broadcast the proceedings themselves, unlike the legislature or House of Commons, which have had live video for a number of years. I look at Washington State, and there was a controversy this time last year in Washington State where the legislators in Washington State actually wanted to walk back their version of the FOI law and actually bring some secrecy into the legislature and for lawmakers in their own district offices. They wanted to take certain documents, classes of documents, take those out of the FOI law and allow them to treat things with more secrecy. The media in Washington State and civil society groups all got together and banded together to force the governor to veto that bill. So it wasn't allowed at the time, and basically the governor said to the legislature in Washington State, go back, scrap this, or find another way to rewrite this law in order to make it palatable to the citizens to whom you ultimately report to, the citizens who ultimately own this government. So the ongoing battle of the public and the media trying to seek information about their institutions, this is ultimately whatever is happening at the legislature. The root of it is the institutional secrecy, and we're learning more about how it operates as this scandal goes on. But we've always got to remember that this is a chance for someone to make things right, and a way to make things right at the legislature is to change the law and to place the legislature itself under Freedom of Information, just like government ministries are, and just like government crown corporations and agencies are. We deserve to have full accountability and transparency at the legislature.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, so far, has the new mayor of Vancouver, Kennedy Stewart, lived up to his promise to be open and transparent?
Well, it's still early days. He has put forward his motions on lobbyist registry, motions on a conflict of interest tightening. Those are moving slowly. We don't have new laws on those yet. The lobbyist registry, he's actually going a different route. There is a section within the Vancouver Charter that allows the City Hall to decide how businesses should be regulated. Lobbyists are a business, and they could easily regulate lobbyists as an offshoot from that section. It would be pretty simple to drop the policy, drop the bylaw, but instead what he's doing is getting Victoria involved. That Victoria already has a lobbyist registry provincially. Some of those lobbyists who lobby provincially also lobby municipally, but they don't have to register municipally. So his thinking is that why duplicate services? Why not ask the provincial government to extend the lobbyist registry as it is provincially, make a new law that says lobbyist registry provincially, also has dominion over City of Vancouver, and maybe throw some more money into the lobbyist registry provincially, and let them be the ones to actually do the registration and also be the ones to do the investigation for those who run afoul of the law. So that's his idea there. The conflict of interest, at least he is speaking words which we really didn't hear at all from Vision Vancouver. There was the Olympic Village scandal during the 2008 election, and then afterwards they had recommendations on how to increase the integrity of government, but they never acted upon them. Instead, Vision Vancouver broke all kinds of transparency and accountability promises. Different story now, where you have Kennedy Stewart at least talking that language, because that is a major concern of the public, of people in government getting special favors, people in government living high off the public purse, or double dipping, or using their roles in government for the furthering of their own, or advancement of their own career and financial well-being. People have had enough of that, and they want their municipal halls to get that under control and to have some accountability for those who do run afoul.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been investigative reporter Bob Mackin, a great award-winning reporter. He's the publisher of thebreaker.news, his website, thebreaker.ca. If you have any questions for Bob or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.